on behalf of CSPS, I'm welcoming you. And I think before I introducing you, it's really something we need this hour to discuss such books, though it's quite a different series. Okay, so why I'm saying this because which I'll also tell in my introduction, this book which is talking about Muslim and post-colonial India, written by a Muslim scholar. That is a very thing which I wanted to pinpoint. So before that, I'll introduce Nadira Katun, is an assistant professor at School of Communication, XIM University, Bhubaneswar, Odisha. She was visiting assistant professor at Master University Hamilton from January 2021 to 2022. Her research and teaching interests are film studies, cultural studies, post-colonial, popular culture, Muslim identity, Indian cinema, media representation, and new media. She has contributed to academic journal and edited volume on Bollywood and Muslim identity. Her book titled Post-Colonial Bollywood and Muslim Identity Production, Representation and Reception is recently released with Oxford University Press, UK. So the most important thing which I said about the book is I think first insider voice on Indian cinema, if I'm not wrong. We have few such as Ira Bhaskar or Roshni Sen Gupta, and Reading Muslim on Celluloid or Islamic Hate Culture, for that matter Mukul Keshwan's book. I was always hunting because if you read the book which is written by outsider, and I don't know whether it's offensive or not, but to use this word outside insider, you will see a clear difference from the in perspective when you read her book. I read almost more than half of the book for this moderation preparation, and the book started with a very good introduction that what make her chose this topic, like why. Because as I said to Shalini when I came, she was all alone. I said it's not like secularism that where people will flood. There will be very few people to sit and listen on cinema. It's not that hot yet, this topic. So the way the things which intrigue her to choose cinema or to study cinema, now I'm studying cinema, Shalini is studying cinema, is a bit a different time. But when she chose, it was a very different time, and I would request you to tell that why you, what is the reason why you in her conversations and say. Apart from that, this book is we were also talking a few minutes back. Usually, when it comes to representation in post-colonial world, or because the time we always count Indian cinema, if we see as a political analysis, we count from 1947 or so. In all those times, people, when you ask anyone, now every other person is being opinionated of cinema. Earlier, this was not the case. When they are giving the opinion, they are talking something which is very which was problem there in 1970 or before 2014, or there was a news headline on Muslim representation that the representation of Muslim is like spitting to shitting. So when people were talking about the cloth, color, bad representation, good representation of minority, or for that matter tribals or Dalit, so people have their opinion. They keep saying that this is wrong, they show Muslim like that. Now it's completely changed. Now it has gone to on the verge basically, where Muslims are completely been shown that they are not part of this country or society, that they have to prove. So if you read the book, she uses very interesting images in the book. So this is the Akbar, portrayed a Mughal ruler in India, and this is Alauddin Khilji Ranveer Singh in Padmavat. I think on that she'll speak more. So this shift from spitting to shitting is very beautifully she categorized in 4 or 5 chapters, and one very interesting thing for those who are from cinema studies, I always believe whenever someone say, are you going for field work? So I said, why should I go for field work? I'm watching film and sitting in library. All my like fellow librarians said, yaar, you are studying and watching films. But methodologically, for a scholar who wanted to pursue cinema, this is a really golden book. That what is the use of personal interviews? That I never imagined that the personal interviews which will become this much powerful and create this much powerful narrative, more than the critique, the filmmaker, or more than any cinema scholar. So I think from that perspective also your book is amazing, and I'm really like I'm like in third year of my PhD. So I feel like changing many things. So it's also danger if you are in the mid of your PhD in cinema. The way she made the book. So I think the most beautiful part, and this book is like from 1947 or 1950 till 2000. So it covers very good range of shift in cinema, especially when we see cinema from before 2014 and now. It's a very different, and now people are writing, historians are writing, political analysts are writing, but what is the need of an academic insight is this book will give you that answer. And though it sounds very tough, that post-colonial and all these words, this is very heavy words, but this book is very easy, very lyrical, so I would suggest you to read also. Now I request Nadira to please give your presentation. You have time 30 to 40 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nehal, for such kind words. I never thought of that. That very good words will come out for this book. Yeah, but one interesting thing while listening to you, I just you started saying that there are scholars who wrote about Muslims and Muslim representation, and they are not actually they are not giving any insider's view. Actually, it never occurred to me. I never thought, and it never came in that particular sense. When you were telling at that time, I was realizing, yeah, I have not actually referred any Muslim scholar who is particularly writing on Bollywood cinema and particularly writing on Muslim representation. Yeah, it is fascinating to know that.
Thank you. It's your book.
Okay, what I will do, I will read out certain sections. I intentionally have not kept presentation because presentation I find it's quite boring at a point of time. Yeah. So rather, okay. So if I read out certain sections, that would be much more interesting. So at that time, before starting, as Nehal has pointed out, the moment and when I thought of writing this book and thought of choosing this book, this is actually my PhD work, an extension of my PhD work. I started working in 2010 and I completed PhD in 2016 in GISS. So when I chose this topic, actually before that I did my integrated PhD, as I have done my integrated PhD. I did my MPhil on social media. At that time, social media was just coming in 2008. So even there, I worked on public sphere and how social media is creating or raising voice. But beyond that, although I was interested, but I was not really interested to continue that work for my PhD. But actually, I was always some kind of conflict was going on in my mind because I belong to West Bengal, and that is not also from Kolkata. Because whenever I tell people that I'm from West Bengal, and they always, immediately the next sentence is you are from Kolkata, because West Bengal doesn't have any other identity than Kolkata. I belong to West Bengal, a small town called Kotalpur, that is a Bankura district, that is in Bankura district. And I have always studied in government school, government colleges and all. And in that particular remote place, I will say, I will not say remotest, but remote place. So, of course, the kind of discourse and the kind of dialogue we just get to know in big cities and metro cities, the rural areas, the dialogues are a little different. Because at that time when I was growing up, these three khans were also emerging. So, as these three khans were emerging, so my school mates and the school friends, they were very much fascinated with the whole idea that my family carried a similar surname, that is Khan. Though I don't have the Khan surname, because again, you know, because women have very fluid identity. So, but they were very interested and fascinated. But at the same time, at home, when I'm seeing my mom, when some visitor is coming from a majoritarian community, my mom is a little reluctant to offer food. Or I have a mother tongue at home that is mixed of Urdu and Bengali. It has become a mixed up thing now. I used to be very ashamed of if we are speaking that language in front of a person who is belonging to other religion in my childhood. So I used to think that in my school I am so much pampered by my friends because my family is having Khan surname and that is so glamorous. But why at my home I am having this kind of conflicted situations? Even in film, we are seeing that the whole glamorized aura of these Khans. Then that was, and I was really fascinated with cinema from my childhood. Because at that time, in my childhood, the only Saturday, Sunday we used to have these films, Durdasan and Saturday afternoon, that was my fixed. I will come back from school and I will watch the film. So, of course, cinema was my passion and fascinated with cinema to watch. And at the same time, the identity crisis was always there because if I used to go or I used to take a public transport, someone is just asking my name. I used to be very reluctant to just say my name. What is actual my name? There are times when I have talked about my name is Ruby because that's my nickname. So there are many such incidents that actually inspired me to take up a topic like this. Now, while working on it, I just when I completed I was just doing field work, as Nehal just now pointed out. I have huge amount of empirical data, and I did my data collection in 2012 and 2013. At that time, the political scenario of India and political landscape was very different. And when I rewrote my book, I just restructured my book in 2018 and 2019 and 2020. The huge change we see in the political landscape, right? So therefore, I had to restructure the book. I had to accommodate new interviews, new empirical data, so that I can just give the current context what's happening now. So when I was just restructuring and reorienting the data at that time, I reconnected some of the filmmakers and one of them, Javed Akhtar. So I will start my talk with his quote. For a long time, we have not made any film on partition. On that mayhem, with huge, humongous, grand part of Indian history, perhaps Indian cinema did not have the language. We don't have the syntax to deal with that. So we just pretended that it has never happened, and there was a total silence in Hindi cinema. At the same time, this chapter of Indian history. So, and that's how I connected that. If we actually, interestingly, when we are talking about partition, we have not given much importance. That means we have not given much importance to communal politics of India. There are a lot of communal politics, and there are a lot of riots connected to communal politics. Those that existed in India, those were never covered, or those never got a place on screen. So that's why I write. I was interviewing Javed Akhtar, a successful, renowned lyricist, poet, and screenwriter of Bollywood, also an Indian political activist. He is also an Indian political activist, for the empirical data of this book, and he pointed out, he replied to my question concerning that the reiteration of stereotypical Muslim representation in post-colonial Bollywood, Hindi cinema or contemporary Bollywood cinema. He is right in pointing out how Bombay cinema or Bollywood cinema has conveniently overlooked the most complex and controversial issues of independent India, and the partition is one of them. India witnessed a number of communal events in post-independence India, such as multiple riots throughout the country at the time. There were some major communal riots which took place and had an impact across the country. Then I have mentioned there are quite a few which happened in the book, but I'm not going into details of that. Now, when we talk about communal politics and communal violence were never represented. On the other hand, while on the other hand we have witnessed a spate of communal violence, on the other hand in India, along with other nations, saw the emergence of terrorism committed in the name of Islam in the last 3 decades. Most interestingly, the above mentioned, that means the communal violence, incidents of communal violence, never acquired an important space in the Bollywood cinema as mentioned by Javed Akhtar. But Indian terrorism became an overexplored genre in Bollywood cinema. So, thus, Bollywood has represented Muslims through a selective ideological lens, often overlooked, situating them in landmark Indian socio-political historical events. So, connecting to that, I have primary theorization for this book. I have adopted Edward Said and how he has looked at the otherization and us versus them, the whole argument and the dichotomy. Then if I look at the structure of the book, I have divided this book into 5 different analysis chapters. The first one, I have talked about the post-partition era and the involvement of Muslims in filmmaking in the post-partition era and afterwards. And in the second chapter, I have talked about Muslim historical genre and Muslims in historical genre. If you look at, interestingly, Muslim historical genre was the genre where initially after independence in 50s and 60s, where Muslims were good, they were rulers, they are like benevolent rulers and they are nice. But at the same time, Muslims in historical genre, in the current, after 2000, all Padmavat and these Khilji, Aurangzeb, and these characters started coming into existence. So that's the chapter talks about. Then the third chapter, Muslim social genre, the exotic exclusive to ordinary inclusive. This particular chapter, exotic exclusive, that means if we look at Muslim social genre, already an established genre because we have noticed the work of Iravaskar and Richardson, and they have already established that particular genre, Muslim historical, Muslim social, and there he's talking about the whole idea of Muslim genre in 70s and late 60s, and there Muslims are primarily aristocrats and nawabs. But Muslim, even if you look at their ordinary inclusive, that genre is primarily Iskia and the recent films, the contemporary films, but they have the social connotations. Then the third chapter, Muslim political, that's not any established genre beforehand. I have not come across anything as such Muslim political genre. So that I coined as Muslim political, and also I have come across in some magazine, I can't remember this moment, there was lucidly this particular term was used in that particular magazine for a essay. And this particular chapter talks about the anti-Pakistan jingoism to Islamophobia. Of course, we know about that. And then modern Muslim genre, and that's primarily talks about from elegant to secular Muslims. So as first topic and first chapter, we are talking about the role of Muslims in filmmaking. The first chapter I have primarily here I am going to talk about not entire chapter, but again the politicization of that particular era and how actually that particular era influenced filmmaking. So I will read out certain sections from there, and I will quote also one filmmaker, Sham Benegal. Sham Benegal, you know that filmmaker, and what he quoted about it. Muslims have been an integral part of Hindi cinema, or Indian Hindi cinema, since its inception over 100 years ago. The involvement of films was also influenced by the political landscape of the nation. The acceptability of Muslim actors became a significant problem in the post-partition period. There were a number of riots across the nation in the pre-partition era and across both the nations in the post-partition period, which had negative effect on ordinary human imagination of social acceptance of Muslim actors and stars in India. In Muslim actors subsequently took non-Arabic names like Jayant, Zakaria Khan, Dilip Kumar, Yusuf Khan, Meena Kumari, Najibuddin Banu, Johnny Walker, Badruddin Kazi, and so on. There were many. Possibly they felt that it was a required change to hide their religious identity in order to be accepted by Hindus. Celebrated director Sham Benegal had the following to say: when you had the whole business of partition particularly, it was a problem for those who wanted to be popular in film. That's why they changed their name from Muslim to Hindu name, because the majority of the audience was Hindu at that time. So, but most interestingly, though they had to change the name for the acceptability, but at that time the film themes were very secular. At this moment, the three biggest stars, they are Khans, but the narratives has changed, right? Narratives are actually coexisting and it's going along with the state ideology, and it's following the status quo. So that is actually very fascinating to look at. You are forced to change your name, but you had, that means how much influence state does in terms of filmmaking. Now, second analysis chapter, that is Muslim historical genre and Muslims in historical genre, from diplomat warrior to barbarian outsiders. So automatically, so you have the diplomat warrior, the king like Akbar was huge popular in Muslim historical genre. The last one was Jodha Akbar, but after that we are seeing only barbarian outsiders. In this chapter, I shall critically investigate the representation of Muslims in historical cinematic text in two categories: Muslim historical films from 1950s to 2000, and then Muslims in historical films from 2011 to 2019. In this section, I shall critically look at sharp distinction between representing Muslims in historical genre and Muslim historical genre in this chapter. Most of the Muslim historical films in post-independence period, so-called Nehruvian era in 1950s and 60s, were based on secular Mughal rulers and focused on exoticism of those rulers. The films in these genre and participants of my empirical study hint that Muslims were positively stereotyped at this moment. Yes, at that moment also, Muslims, if we look at, they are actually stereotyped. Though they are positively stereotyped, but they are ultimately stereotyped, right? They are always exotic. On the other hand, contemporary historical films are inspired by iconic Muslim historical figures, myths, and events to create an enemy image of outsiders who have been marked with specific political signs. Here I argue that by adopting an anti-Islamic stance, contemporary historical films in Bollywood have become a powerful weapon for fostering nationalism. The films like Panipat, Keshri, Tanhaji are suitably aligned with the saffronized version of historical narratives. These films adopt a right-wing political stance to construct evil images of Muslim foreigners and give currency to the idea of Hindu nationalism. Most interestingly, if you look at the whole insiders and outsider business of these films, and at this moment, Muslims are represented, and these rulers, either it is connected to Mughal, so they are actually represented in the contemporary cinema as outsider. And when they are, and in what time and the intensity or the politics of the country at this moment, what's going on, CAA, CAB and all, and at that time, very conveniently, you are also putting across the whole idea of outsider image. About secular warrior and Islamic culture, the films of 1950s and 60s, the narratives of the films focused more on inclusivity. It was reflected through the most syncretic among the medieval rulers. Further, most of these Muslim historical films depicted Mughal emperor as intellectual, secular, and also for their effective governance. Social activist and scholar Dr. Ramponiani thinks filmmakers at that point were rooted in secular values. Films were trying to uphold the secular ethos and positive image of the communities. And also it justifies, because when I was talking to filmmaker Hyder Ali, who has written the film Jodha Akbar, he is telling that these films are all fiction. And what he tells about Jodha Akbar, I would like to read out. Akbar's love story was completely a fiction, and in fact, that Akbar married a princess called Jodha from Jaipur. He was Marmal's daughter. This is the history. This is the only history. Akbar married 100 wives. One of them was Jodha. But I wrote as if Jodha is the only wife. Actually, Jodha, according to the history, was his third wife. That means the way you can just project the history and fictional history, you can just, even that's what we have noticed in Padmavat. It is also fictionalized history, and you can make it, you can just claim it as history, or even you can just, and as you can claim it as history, there the conflict arises. I will quote certain other audiences' interviews. There actually you will get to know, or if I have not quoted here, at least in the book it is there, they are actually thinking that these are history, and they are pointing out that at least through these films we got certain historical account. So it was good for us to know about in years past. So moreover, why these films actually represented Muslim as nice, naive and good governor, Nasri Munni Kabir Khan, the filmmaker, he points out, mainstream cinema has always been stereotypical, and they are cupboard characters, and the Muslim historical is no exception. In the post-independence era, there was a conscious effort by the filmmakers. The social fabric of the country was torn apart by partition, and they attempted to show the benevolent Muslims and the good Muslims. Yes, that's the argument we have already discussed. Though they are nice, but they are stereotyped. Now the contemporary era of Muslim rulers and Muslims in historical films, we need to talk a bit, because that's the most appropriate at this moment. So though with regards to the Muslim historical genre in the last decades, historical films of the Bombay cinema have made one of the most important platforms in projecting certain ideological dialogues such as communalism, nationalism, secularism. Bollywood has made a concerted effort to reframe historical genre to include the reinterpretation of the glorious Hindu nationalist history. At this moment, of course, automatically, whatever narratives we are looking through, even Tanaji, through Manikarnika, all of them, what they are claiming, they are talking about Hindu nationalist history, not the Mughal rulers. That's why Mughal rulers are not anymore the heroes. It is also worth mentioning that the NDA government has also introduced in Parliament the Citizenship Amendment Bill and Citizenship Amendment Act. As a consequence, there has been a long-running national outbreak of mass demonstrations, as well as a string of unfortunate assaults of residents, communal riots, arrests of civil society members, and student demonstrations who have been at the front line of anti-CAA protests. While the debate of insider and outsider continues to be at its peak in Indian political sphere, wherein the discourse and number of Bollywood historical cinema construct Muslim identity as outsider. The most well-known of such films, I have just named a few: Bajirao Mastani 2015, Padmavat 2018, Manikarnika the Queen of Jhansi 2019, Panipat 2019, KSP 2020, Tanhaji 2020 again. So these films construct an imaginary notion of the past in the light of contemporary socio-political situation, because these films are characterized by their exoticization of others, who are the invader or who are the invading barbarian, the enemy of the nation. So from 2017 to 2020, there were a few films which could be classified under historical genre. The last decade, Muslims have started reappearing in the historical films as barbaric outsider. I argue that the sudden disappearance and reappearance of Muslims in historical genre are a reflection of public perception regarding Indian Muslims today using historical tropes. Therefore, I consider historical genre to be a well-established phenomenon that fuels the current political landscape of India itself. As history making is always a retrospective fact generation process, it is more often than not biased. As I was stating that, I will quote one audience's interview. So one of the audience participant pointed out, she is actually a working lady, and she points out, I quote, "I liked Khilji's character, and I also find similarities in the way we read about him in our history book. I got resemblances in terms of his violent nature, barbarism. After watching the film, I immediately remember my childhood." So the kind of scar and the kind of reception from the audience side, it says a lot that how much these films are influencing audience's mind. Then I will talk about certain even recent connotations and recent terms which are adopted in the historical context. For example, surgical strike. Though historical films claim that they create a space to reimagine the past, we must also admit that the makers of these films prop up their representations on today's perception while recreating past legends. They are creating a space within a space. In the broader spectrum of historical film genre, these films utilize the contemporary socio-political issues to gain acceptance in the current political climate. Here, Michael Foucault's concept of heterotopia can be utilized as critical lens to argue how film Tanaji is providing heterotopia by valorizing the glorious Maratha history and demonizing medieval Muslim rulers. Therefore, these films are more about our contemporary times rather than about the past. That these films coincide heavily with current political narratives can be shown through the example of the film Tanaji. Ajay Devgan, who portrays the role of protagonist of the film, started promoting the film by uploading the trailer of the film on Twitter, writing 4th February 1670, the surgical strike that shook the Mughal Empire. The expression surgical strike gained special currency after Indian military intervention against Pakistan in 2016 and has since then entered the public vocabulary. Though it is a very new term for military tactic, audiences were led to believe and accepted that operations like surgical strikes shown in the film were actually conducted in the Mughal era. School teacher Puspanjali sees another participant. One of the participants points out, I like the way they have strategized and planned the war. From the film, we get to know that such kind of planning was done even in those eras. We come to know so many things about the history as well. We don't get that account of history from anywhere else. So that actually talks a lot. On the other hand, actually if we look at the actual character of Khilji, he was actually iconoclast, and the kind of sense he had for art and the other kind of governance he had, those were never pointed out. So again, the kind of image of Khilji you are putting across or you are painting, and people are accepting in that same way the way you are painting it. So that is actually giving a kind of, you are creating an alternative historical discourse. Then the next section, that actually this particular section is inspired by my article, what I published in 2018 on love jihad and Bollywood. So this particular section talks about that, gendering the politics of Hindu nationalism through historical film. If we talk about, I think we are getting late. I'm just speaking a lot. So we will. 5 minutes, right? So I will just narrow down. Here in this section, primarily I have talked about the whole argument of love jihad, and I have connected that how contemporary politics has utilized that, the whole idea of love jihad, and that is also getting reflected on cinema. Here I would like to quote two films. One is Padmavat and second one is Manikarnika, the Queen of Jhansi, where women are the lead protagonists. According to Karni Shenna, Rajput caste community, the film Padmavat contains an intimate and that is of course objectionable scene in which the Muslim king Alauddin Khilji fantasizes about being intimate with the Hindu queen Padmavati. So that's why the whole outrage was there. The Karni Sena vandalized the entire film set, and we know all of it. And later on, another film that is Rajasthan-based, Manikarnika I'm talking about, Rajasthan-based Brahmin organization Sarv Brahmin Mahasabha objected the film Manikarnika, claiming that it contained a love scene between Rani Lakshmibai and the British East India Company officer. So that is also the whole idea of love jihad also talks about that when your women are going outside your community. Then even that's how I connected to the contemporary issue when I have quoted certain politicians, for example Babul Supriyo, when he is talking about glorifying and glamorizing and sharing them and talking about beti par paraya dhan hoti hai, is bar Bida kar denge, and all of it in terms of connecting to this whole gendering, the politics. Then Muslim social, here I don't have much, I couldn't find out much to politicize, and because I don't know, somehow I was really fascinated when I was writing the book. It was in my mind that I will connect each and every aspect of film and film representation with the politics, contemporary politics, because I wanted to document something where even after 50 years, people will get to know that how politics has influenced cinema. So in third chapter, Muslim social, I did not find as such something which is really politicized thing. So therefore, this is a whole lot of ordinary Muslims to Nawabs and aristocrats. Then that's why I'm directly going to the next chapter, because I don't have time. I have probably 2 minutes. So that is Muslim political genre. Muslim political genre, actually I have divided into multiple segments. The first one, that is communalism and nationalism. I have given the whole idea of communalism and nationalism and how that has influenced filmmaking. And then there I want to quote, this one I have to quote, filmmaker Mahesh Bhatt. He talks about his experience of filmmaking of the film is Jakham. I don't know how many of you have watched that film. Jakham is a film where you are talking about riots and communal violence. And he has pointed out, I had to fight with the government of India. At the time, the Indian government was in power. They were doing everything to create trouble for my film, which finally got the maximum award too. They made me digitally correct those saffron bands, which the goons were wearing. They were, there was a sequence where the hospital was stormed by the goons, and they said that we will not give you the film certificate. So therefore he had to alter. There automatically tells that government and the state had much more power to dictate art and craft and also free speech. Next section of this chapter talks about ideal image of family and Hinduized nation. Why I talk about that? Because at that moment we are seeing that all the films of Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, all KKK films are coming out. And what these KKK films are telling, they are telling that we are the ideal family, and who are representing those ideal families? Of course, ideal family where you are showing that you are one kind of culture of the nation, then automatically then you are just leaving behind many other cultures, and you are telling that this culture is the standard culture and this is the Indian culture. That means automatically the other cultures are becoming the other. So that was the main discussion and main argument of this film. I will quote one more journalist here. After Babri, a lot of films were released, such as Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, Hum Saath Saath Hai, to highlight the Indian Hindu joint family culture. In those films, there were few Muslim side characters. The representation of those films made it clear that we don't have any problem if you are a Muslim, but you have to be subordinate to the majority. For example, you keep the head cap, wear beautiful dresses, sing nice songs, and stay like that. We majorities will protect you. We are the secular state and what we call pseudo-secular, and stay as a subordinate minority. We are there for you. The hegemony is ours. The concept was propagated many times in Bollywood films after Babri demolition, 1992. Then the next was politics of portraying Muslim gangsters and mafias. Almost all of us, we know that what are those films. Even the last was, if I'm not wrong, that is Rise. That Shah Rukh Khan's film. Rise. So I know I'm getting late. And then I will not go into that, but if you look at, most interestingly, these new age gangster films are more like they are negative, but at the same time, Zanjeer, there the gangster is benevolent, who is just doing the social work and that kind of character they wear. Even that we have seen in Rise as well, where Shah Rukh Khan is just going and doing the work. But there are many gangster films, for example, or Dawood inspired films. They are actually involving terrorist activities. So there were many such films. Then the next one on terrorism. Primarily, if we talk about terrorism, that also divided into 3 different categories. One, terrorism in Kashmir. Second one, terrorism was across the country after 1992 Mumbai riot. and again inspired by certain gangsters. Then the third was 9/11. That actually gave a kind of age. After though the initial floodgate was the Roja, that film by Maniratna, that was Kashmiri in Kashmir. But after 9/11, actually the whole idea of terrorism glamorized, got glamour. So I just asked one college student that what is your idea of cinematic enemy or enemy image in cinema? He told me, whenever I think about an enemy, it is always, it comes to my mind and it brings to my mind the image of terrorist imported from Pakistan. There is no problem of equating terrorism with Pakistan, but there are times when Pakistan Muslim and terrorism interchangeably used. That is the problem. So Manisha Shetty actually pointed out or coined this particular idea of how when you are representing nationalism or patriotism through terroristic idea or terrorism or certain themes, she has coined this term as cinepatriotism. Then Pakistan as an enemy, all of us may know. Again, Pakistan is an enemy. Yeah, that is correct. But at the same time, if you are just interchangeably or if you are intertwining the whole idea of Pakistan Muslims and the war and enemy image, that becomes a problem. Because sometimes you are equating Pakistani with Muslims. That means that gives a kind of different connotations altogether. Then modern, that is the last film genre, that is the last chapter. Here, this is fascinating to look at because after 2005, there are a lot of films where we are seeing that Muslims without any baggage of Muslim. For example, Zindagi Milegi Nahi Dobara, where you are just getting Farhan's character and who is not a Muslim, rather who is any other ordinary human being. But at the same time, Chak De India, for example, the photograph also I have used here, that you have to be allegiant to the nation. That kind of idea is there, that is tagged in this kind of film. Though he is not carrying any extra baggage of through certain symbols, but there are certain things through that he has to redeem himself and he has to prove himself that he is actually a patriotic person, he is allegiant to the nation. That is one. Second theme where actually that is very important, Muslim characters in these films, Muslim women characters primarily. For example, films like if you talk about Lipstick Under My Burqa or Secret Superstar or even Gully Boy, all of them, the Muslim women, the plight of Muslim women are shown in such a way that they are the most oppressive race in the entire world and Muslim men are there to just torture them. I think, I will just point out, or just read out one paragraph and I will skim. The portrayal of Muslim women is most strikingly different in the Muslim modern genre when compared to earlier films. As we have seen in the previous chapters, that means earlier, because I have separate section on Muslim women and Tawaif characters. Here, as we have seen in the previous chapter, Muslim women often depicted as Tawaif or were shown as veiled in earlier genre. Now the female characters are given a crucial role and used to build the narrative. They are the victims of polygamy, sufferers of domestic violence, bearer of the conservatism, and so on. In Gully Boy, Murad Ahmed, the lead character, stays with his abusive father, Aftab Ahmed, who is not only an abusive husband and parent, but also the father's dismay brings home a much younger second wife. Criticizing the overused depiction of Muslim polygamy in Bollywood, sociologist, when I spoke to, I actually quoted then I deleted for the time, sociologist idea quote. She is actually assistant professor in St. David's Gold Cup. She pointed out, she actually argued on this, that how Muslim women's plight is actually glamorized and the kind of new age discourse it's created. When I spoke about it to one audience, and she's IT engineer, she's talking about that she is saying, she has expressed, Muslims are generally less educated. The reason behind that is getting married many times. Nowadays, everything is so expensive that it is very difficult to bring up a child properly. As a result, maximum 1 or 2 children get proper education. The reason for getting married many times is because their religion supports them. So automatically you just get to know that it's not only the film is propagating, other people also believe, and it is actually catering to the audience, whatever they have certain assumptions and preconceived notions. And what these women are doing when this kind of representations are happening, they are oppressed. The female protagonists in these films try to challenge traditionalism, which is equated to conservatism, and are shown preferring to adopt modernity, which is expressed as progressive significantly, and that is also modernity. Whenever we talk about modernity, we talk about the westernization and western modernity, right? Significantly, women in these films existed only within the boundary between traditionalism and modernity, a binary that has existed from the colonial period. By confining them within the narrow bounds demarcated by traditional and modern, I argue these films choose to ignore larger issues of inequality and exclusion faced by Muslim women in society. I think that's what I should keep, because I have already exceeded my time a lot. Thank you. Please, if you have any questions, you can.
Hi Nadira, this is Ishan, and I work on the new wave, so 1970s is the time that I'm more fascinated with. That's what you talk the least about because of the time.
Yeah, I know, it's there in the book.
I know. So I actually wanted to know, because you talked about Tawayaf and the Muslim social. When you talk about Awadh and cinema, within the Muslim community there's bifurcation, Shias and Sunnis, and there's a political dynamic between the two communities. So who decides who gets the representation, and do you also study that kind of representation of Muslim?
No, I have not. I have not gone into details of Muslim community themselves and their demarcations and their sects. No, rather I have looked at Muslims as a whole, rather than going into intricacies of Muslims.
And what do you think about Saeed Akhtar Mirza's Muslim socials? Because they are very different from the royal Tawayaf Muslims.
Yes. Actually, if you look at that time films, and that is very fascinating. Thank you for asking the question. That time, actually, even Salim Langwell mein Matru.
Yeah.
Filmmakers had the autonomy and they had the power to showcase what they feel at that moment. But at this moment, even alternative films, if there is any, I think there is less number of voice that one can actually talk about and politicizing about the issue. So I think that was the golden, as you have rightly pointed out, that was the golden era, and even for that matter, it's not only Saeed Akhtar Mirza, rather Bimal Roy, criticizing state and talking about poverty. So that, even for that matter, even popular cinema, Coolie, what Coolie's, the character of Coolie is doing in the film, he's challenging the status quo and he's challenging the bourgeois community, right? On the other hand, the other film, Zanjeer, when he's challenging the state and in the jail, Amitabh Bachchan's character, the No. That was Zanjeer, or when Asrani was the jailer? Sholay, right? He was in the jail? Yes. Yeah. So in the initial scenes, So even he is just challenging the state power, that whatever you want to do, you just do it. I don't care. I don't think you can do that. So you had that time, you had the autonomy. Though there is emergency, there is carve of freedom of space at that, but cinema was much more free at that moment, I find.
So within the Muslim community, there are Pasmanda Muslims who do not get any representation at all in cinema. Have you find any film that have shown Pasmanda Muslims, which are considered Dalits among the Muslims?
No.
Because all are Khans and all are their high
there is
caste.
no representation.
I think the answer lies to your question is like you have looked at a holistic approach. Yeah, that's a very minute lens looking at Pasmanda.
Because
right.
that would have been very specifically if I would have taken a particular era, just one era, probably 70s to 80s or that particular golden era, then those minute lenses I could have gone. But here the landscape is really huge, and primarily here my argument in the entire book is primarily not Muslims themselves, rather how Muslim identity is politicized in the bigger, larger picture of it. Yeah.
And methodologically also it's not possible, na? That when we are looking at one identity, I think covering Muslim, and politically also that if we are talking about one community, it's still trouble of existence. So rather we don't have time, like it's for her as a Muslim, it's a question of existence. So rather than talking about another level of minority,
other level of marginalization is challenging to.
So
it's going into a different terrain actually. It's going
that will be another study.
That should be understood, exactly. Yeah.
I'm Nava Fatima. I'm pursuing my PhD from MCRC Jamia. So when we were talking about this Muslim historical genre, and you mentioned how Jodha Akbar or films of those times also were fictionalized. Those are fictionalized history, and the same is happening today when we see a film like Manikarnika, although the lens is very different. So I just wanted to know what is the onus on cinema to represent history in its actual form. Again, what is reality, what is actual history? So because cinema is always put in that question, put in that limelight cinema has some responsibility. So what's your take on that? I mean, when Muslims are positively stereotyped, we did not raise those questions, but now with this Saffronization and all of that, it is being put up. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to know your take on it.
This film is hugely inspired by the socio-political space of that particular time. So at this moment, though the post-partition era, though there were a lot of tensions, but at the same time there was a kind of socialist government who was actually probably inspired by socialism, and where is a benevolent governance and Nehruvian era, and there they wanted to have a kind of secular plethora of the Indian space and India. But so it was a kind of conscious effort by the government and the filmmakers, because after independence, if you look at again, Indian government had huge amount of motivation and inspiration for filmmaking, and huge amount of actually cooperation for the filmmaking. But now, if you look at the lens got changed again, what is the demand, what market wants, that we have to understand. Because now if you are making a film where benevolent Muslim and you are just recreating again Jodha Akbar, I think the way the film has done the business in 2008 or 2009, it is next to impossible at this time, because again audience is changed now. So primarily we have to understand that it is a kind of again business, it is production, it's market driven business. So what market wants, you are going to make that, you are going to cater that. It's not that filmmakers, they are actually polarized, or they are really right-wing minded. It's not that. Rather, they are just catering and they are just serving the demand. That's it.
So cinema in itself has very little autonomy in that sense.
Yeah, it is, as it is market driven automatically. Yeah, because again, if you look at today's news channels also, why news channels are doing these, whatever the drama going on, it's all about the demand and supply. Whenever you are just making something in a capitalist market, you have to look at your sustainability, and to look at your sustainability, you are going to create certain things that probably it's not actual and that's not good for the society at the same time, but you are doing it because market wants that.
So thank you so much. I'll conclude. And so again, it's a very like we created something very good discourse, a presentation and the question, and many things which I remember later. For example, again methodological question. I'm saying that the way you are using that, like you use the heterotopia, I think, and even I note it down for my own dissertation. so
That's smart.
Yeah. So to see like the lens, I discussed also earlier that the lens, how one is seeing, how I am seeing, how she is seeing, is very important. I think in this discussion we come out of that. But from that you told about the secular ethos that Ram Punyani said. I always believe, for example, whether it's Bimal Roy film or Gurudat or right now Khilji, that this secular ethos and state and the Indian cinema, like always Indian cinema critique keeps saying that in comparison to Pakistan cinema, Indian cinema was free or state. I always believe that state was always there, and the Indian cinema was always a state cinema, and for that matter, those who are dominating.
And that's why Madhav Prasad has pointed out already that state apparatus.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
And I always question, like I think after 2014 we are questioning why we are being represented like that. Rosa we accepted, Rosa we celebrated, Bombay we accepted, we celebrated. So I think if we start from 1947, the problem is started from there on. It's for Muslim, women, transgender, everything was invisible. And now it's changing in a very different way. So we are on a point that, okay, why we are doing. So I think this shift, I'll say this shift only, that this shift started from like whenever I was watching Rosa or Bombay, I consumed film a lot. I never felt humiliated or haunted. But because that guy was somewhere coming from somewhere we don't know, that Muslim guy who is villain, who is negative, coming from somewhere we don't know, or maybe from Pakistan or maybe from anywhere, we don't care. And we were enjoying the film and nobody was asking also. But now the narrative is going to shift in a way that that guy is within you. It's sitting somewhere, like his house is somewhere near you, or maybe it's you only. So I think this whole, the secular word which has been used, or a golden period or a glorious period of even in parallel cinema, I don't agree with that. I think this is the reality, but we are here right now. So I think on this note I'll end, and thank you so much for the question and the discussion.
Thank you for coming over and taking out time and coming over, and interesting questions. Thanks a lot.